Morning. My dog thinks someone's here. Morning. Good morning. Kia ora, welcome. Good morning. Where I am, anyway. It might not be morning where you are, but we bring our rain and our nature and our morning energy to you. Thanks for jumping on. This is coffee and koreros with cinnamon. It's pretty early here, Kapiti, New Zealand. It's been raining really, really heavy since about 5 o'clock this morning. So I got up and did a bit of yoga with the dog and made a coffee. And morning is the time where I have all these concepts and thoughts and ideas and downloads and upgrades and whatever else you want to call it going on in my brain. And it tends to be the time that I like to converse and share. So normally once I've done a bit of grounding and meditation or stretching or whatever the day feels like it needs, then I will make myself a hot drink, normally a coffee, but sometimes not, sometimes something else. And I will sit and contemplate whatever has been arising in my mind, whatever dominant themes and concepts, that seem to be prevalent. I started doing this because I felt that intuitively these conversations and ideas were bubbling up in me in order to be shared with others, because we're a collective and we're all one and we're all interconnected. So somewhere out there, somebody will be having some very similar thoughts to me, to you. And so I just thought maybe, just maybe, if I share them, it may resonate. Which is why I do this. Coffee and korero with Sin. This morning, I really wanted to talk about what being a living being means. So we all think, right, that our mamas get pregnant and they birth us and we get a birth certificate and a name and now we're a person, right? Well, it's not so simple. There's a whole lot of other weird sneakiness that goes on. And depending on which vein of thought you come from, depends on why you think that sneakiness is there. At the end of the day, whether it's for this reason or that reason, it's still there, right? So that sneakiness is all kind of, and yeah, get me wrong if you want, I don't really care. It's all kind of witchcraft. Essentially, it's what's called spelling. And when you are birthed, it's actually, all of that is actually maritime terminology, and it's all used because back in the old days when colonialization was happening, and people were going into, countries of indigenous and pretty much taking over, wiping out, rewriting history, telling them how to live their lives, all that sort of stuff. They decided that because they're all in ships, that there's this maritime law. They decided that there's maritime law, which governs anything that travels on the sea, the oceans. Now, I can't remember if it was a fire or a storm. I think it was the fire of London, or maybe it was a big storm. Cannot remember exactly. Look it up on YouTube. Common law has all of this information out there. Anyway, big event happened. The powers that be that write these birth certificates went, oh, we can say that everybody was died at sea, never found, right? So I'm probably not explaining it very well, But when you are birthed through the birth canal of your mother, all the wrong words, you get this certificate, which is actually a death certificate, but it's a birthing certificate to say that your ship has come in. That all now becomes stocks and bonds, which is messed up because you're no longer living, which is messed up because you're alive, right? Breathing, yeah. So under maritime law, corporations and all of these sorts of things can trade stocks and bonds between countries, right? So your birth certificate now becomes one of their stocks and bonds, something they trade through this liquid, fluid place, which is actually just made up. It's all made up. The point is, as long as your birth certificate is lodged and you get sent things where your name is capitalized, the whole way, and as long as your family name is tacked onto the end of your name without this break that says of the family, then actually, legally, they reckon you're dead. Legally, they're treating you like a dead entity because corporations, meaning these pirates pretty much, that made up all this maritime law, they can't make a contract with a living being. Corporations can make contracts with corporations. That's a piece of paper that they sign that needs to be witnessed, blah, blah, blah. Now, living beings, when they make contracts with other living beings, all it needs to be is your thumbprint or your word. A living being doesn't actually need a contract on a piece of paper to make a contract with another living being for it to be binding, because it's universally binding, not legally binding. Universal law, common law, the law of the land, the law of the living beings, which is what we are. Now there's tricks. There's all sorts of tricks that they put in the way that they use words. Now, interestingly enough, depending on what you like looking into, and I'm really autodidactic, so I love learning about all sorts of different things. And one of the things I love learning about is frequency, vibration, resonance, and how that interacts with our world, what that means. Essentially, language is a manipulation of frequency and vibration. Now, when we change the spelling of a word, but we do not change the resonant vibration that it carries when we say that word hasn't actually changed. There's heaps of tricky words in our English language that are actually legalese, which is this maritime legal language that has snuck its way into our normal living languages. Words like morning, good morning. Why would it ever be good to be mourning anything? Grief has its place, don't get me wrong. It's a catalyst for lots of things, but it doesn't usually feel good to mourn. Parents appear that rent. What are you renting? Your kids. Small goat-like animals for ritual sacrifice. Now, these are all examples of how our language has been infiltrated and twisted without our even knowing. And how easy it is for these things to creep in. Now, when we call ourselves a person, excuse me, we're actually saying that we're a dead living being. A dead entity, not a living being, sorry. So we, humans, are living beings. We actually are separated from that maritime law, from all of that strangeness. But we're not told that, right? There's a few things it means to be a living being. Of course, one of the ways that in the old days they used to prove it was to carry around a little mirror in their pocket and breathe on it, because that's your breath, right? You're proving I'm a living being. This is me here. This is me, not this paper. That was a really simple way in the old days that they used to get around and show. And you can actually still do that to this day. If you want to refute ever in common law, a mirror is a really, really handy tool. Now, like I say, jump on YouTube or wherever else and look up common law. Look up what I'm talking about. Look up things like the Cesta QV Trust. Now that one will get you going down some rabbit holes. Anyway, apart from how we got to being dead entities, what does it mean to be a living being? A living being stands under no one. Here's another tricky spell word. We don't understand each other, anyone else, the rules. We can overstand. We can understand, but we don't understand. So to be a free living being, there's a few legal steps that are important. Things like your affidavit of truth, which is essentially just stating that the birth certificate that you were issued is fraudulent and not correct, and that this is the correct you. In that this is where the way your name is made up is really important. You pretty much pick your name. You can keep the name your parents gave you, that's fine. That is absolutely natural and normal, and I think a lot of people tend to do that one. The part that you remove or negate is your family name, your surname. You can still add that on when you're talking to people in a formal manner. For instance, I would be Cinnamon Ebony of the family Green, not Cinnamon Ebony Green. That's a corporation. That's a dead entity. Now that's a whole process. There is plenty of people out there that do that process. They ask for an energy exchange, some of them just do the courses online, and they walk you through what your affidavit of truth means, how exactly to use that in real life, because it means a lot. Things like a lot of our traffic laws are actually based on commerce. A lot of our laws are based on commerce and this maritime commerce law. Now, if you're a living being and you're not trading under a corporation, if you're working for yourself to sustain your life, we're not talking about making millions and millions of dollars of frivolous money that you don't need. But if you're working to sustain your life, then you're actually not part of the corporate world, and a lot of those laws don't apply to you. Things, for instance, like road miles on or car registrations on the road are actually created for commerce reasons, for people doing business, because they were carrying heavy loads, they were traveling more than others, their trucks were bigger, so they did more damage to the roads. That was where these laws came in. But what happened? Oh, they realized that just maybe anyone with a car, maybe anyone driving on the road should now just pay them a whole lot of money and follow a whole lot of rules. Technically, if you're a free living being, none of that applies. But like I say, look it up for yourself. arm yourself with some proper knowledge and find out, if you want to, what all of that legally means. For me, being a free living being is not standing under any other human on this planet. It's about standing shoulder to shoulder. It's about realizing we are all one. We're all really different, don't get me wrong. And you can't put 30 people that have never met each other and have no ties in a room and expect every single person to get on with each other perfectly. That's not what I'm talking about when I say we are all one. What I mean is, no matter how differently someone expresses in this world from you, essentially, when they feel sad, it's the same feeling you get when you feel sad. When they feel lost, it's the same feeling you get when you feel lost. When they feel joy, elation, pride, we all feel the same about whatever. So we are all interconnected and sharing this frequency vibration of energy. And when somebody's sad, the sad energy goes that way. When I'm sad, it comes back this way. It's a flow, a river, a lake, an ocean that we all dip our toes into and are connected through. Now, to be a living being means that we understand, sorry, that was terrible, that we overstand that we have a responsibility to uphold a certain amount of energy in the world. And we get to choose whether that's service to self or service to others. That's a choice. That's fine. Everybody chooses their thing. And whatever they choose, that's not wrong. This is the point of being a living being. We have to take responsibility and ownership for our energy and our choices, i.e., if you go and ding somebody's car because you were being careless, then totally it's your responsibility to take ownership for that and set that right. As much as common law, living being law, the law of one, is all about common sense. Knowing when something is over the top, knowing when you need to extend gratitude, extend apology, make something better. We all know in our hearts. It's the ego that stops us being able to do that. And that's the part that being a true living being, I think, is about. Understanding the oneness and understanding how much ego gets in the way. We have it for a reason and it needs to be there. But it's there as a tool, not as a controller. And if we can pull our egos in just a tiny little bit and understand to be a free living being, we get to make our own choices. We get to listen to others. We get to take on board lots of different strands of information and sit back and decide what weaving together of those strands is correct for us in our lives. We're welcome to show others what ours looks like, but no two will be the same. And I think that, for me, is actually the biggest crux of being a free living being. No two of us will be the same. No two of us will agree on everything. But if you can agree on core points, that's the part that is humanity. That's the part that keeps us connected. And that's the part that helps us understand common law. We don't need a rule book to understand common law. There is one out there. And also, as far as the words that I was speaking of that have infiltrated our language, legalese, go and look up Black's dictionary. There's all sorts in there that will just kind of blow your mind. For me, to be a free living being means living where and how I choose. Now, I know not everybody's going to choose my life, and I don't want anyone to, because it's not theirs. But it's all about choosing our own lives, not having others direct it for us, not feeling like a slave, not doing soulless jobs for no good reason and paying all of our tax to somebody else because apparently we're already dead. It's not about turning a blind eye and putting your mask on to make everybody else feel better in the supermarket. How do you feel? I don't wear one, and it feels great. For me, being a free living being is also about being a freedom advocate. I advocate for everybody to be allowed to make their own choices: medical, nutritional, educational, you name it, it's actually your choice. You don't have to any of it. And that's the bit that we've been really, really lied to and coerced and tricked and put under a spell over. And that's the bit that for me is the most important. Breaking the spell, living free, living with intention and consciousness. And on that note, and this is the end of my coffee and korero on being a free living being. Please love yourself. Today, even if it's only for a second, makes all the world of difference. Breathe on that mirror and remind yourself you are free, living being. And love each other, because we are all the same. We all cry, we all laugh, we all fart. And remember that I love you deeply, deeply, because without you, there is no me, there is no we, there is no us.